"Sir, you need to stand up. Now!" The words cut through the first-class cabin like a snapped cable, sharp and final. Conversations died mid-sentence. A champagne flute froze halfway to a man's lips. Somewhere behind the curtain, a luggage bin slammed shut, the sound echoing too loud, too sudden, like a gunshot in a church. The woman in seat 1A did not move. Captain Thomas Reynolds stood in the aisle, broad shoulders filling the space, his uniform pressed so perfectly it looked more like armor than fabric. Silver hair, 4 gold stripes, 58 years old, and every one of those years convinced the world had bent because he told it to. His jaw was set tight, not with uncertainty, but with offense. The kind of offense that comes when reality refuses to match expectation. "You're in the wrong seat," he said again, louder this time, his voice carrying the weight of command, trained to end arguments before they began. "And we are not taking off until you vacate it." The woman looked up slowly, not startled, not flustered, just calm. Her name was Maya Carter, 44, medium height, trench coat folded neatly at her side, hands resting loosely in her lap, fingers relaxed, nails short, clean. Her face held no panic, no apology, only a quiet, assessing stillness, like someone listening to a storm from inside a solid house. "I'm exactly where my boarding pass assigned me," she said. Her voice was even, not raised, not defensive. That, more than anything, irritated Reynolds. Behind him, the first-class cabin shifted. An older couple in row 2 exchanged a glance. The man adjusted his glasses. His wife pressed her lips together, eyes darting between the captain and the woman, as if watching a live wire spark. In row 3, a tech executive lowered his phone, thumb hovering, unsure whether to keep recording or stop pretending he wasn't. Reynolds exhaled through his nose. Short, controlled, the way he did when junior officers questioned him in the simulator. "That seat costs $12,000, he said. "Full fare. Paid customers only. I don't know how you got past the gate agent, but this ends now." A flicker crossed the face of Lauren Mitchell, the lead flight attendant, standing stiffly near the galley. 41. Perfect posture. Hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her expression into permanent politeness. Her eyes moved from Reynolds to Maya and back again, calculating. She had seen situations like this escalate before, and she knew which side usually won. "Captain," she murmured. "Careful." "The manifest, I'll handle this," Reynolds snapped without looking at her. Lauren fell silent. Her fingers tightened around her tablet. She told herself this wasn't her call. It never was. Still, a knot formed low in her stomach. Something about the woman in 1A didn't fit the usual pattern. No bluster, no pleading, no performative outrage, just that calm. It made Lauren uneasy. Maya felt the eyes on her now. Not just Reynolds, everyone. The air had thickened, heavy with judgment and anticipation. She could almost hear the unspoken thoughts moving through the cabin like a low electrical hum. She doesn't look like first class. There must be a mistake. Why isn't she embarrassed? She had heard these thoughts before, in boardrooms, in security lines, in places where she was always assumed to be temporary, accidental, borrowed. Reynolds leaned closer, invading her space, his shadow falling across her seat. She could smell his cologne, sharp and expensive, layered over coffee and authority. "I'm asking you one last time," he said. "Stand up." Maya looked at him. Really looked. She saw the certainty in his eyes, the absolute belief that this moment would bend in his favor the way moments always had. "No," she said. The word landed hard. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the cabin. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." The man in row 3 lifted his phone again, this time openly, no longer pretending. Reynolds straightened. Color crept up his neck, a slow flush beneath the collar. This was no longer about a seat. This was about defiance, about a woman who didn't flinch when she was supposed to. "You are interfering with the operation of this aircraft," he said, his voice rising, taking on the formal cadence of regulation and threat. "That is a federal matter." Maya's heart beat faster now, but her face didn't change. She knew this line. She knew how quickly words like security and threat could erase context, nuance, humanity. "I have not interfered with anything," she said. "I boarded when instructed. I sat where assigned. I spoke only when addressed." Reynolds laughed, short and humorless, glancing around the cabin as if inviting the others to share in the absurdity. A few people shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed back. "You expect me to believe that?" he said. "Look at you." The words slipped out before he could stop them. There it was. Lauren felt it like a punch. She looked down at her tablet, suddenly fascinated by nothing at all. The elderly woman in row 2 stiffened. The tech executive's jaw tightened. Maya absorbed the sentence without reacting, but inside, something cold settled into place. Not surprise, recognition. "This isn't about my ticket," she said quietly. "It's about what you think someone like me should look like." Reynolds's eyes hardened. "This is about safety," he said. "And I don't have to justify my decisions to you." He turned sharply toward Lauren. "Call airport police. Tell them we have a non-compliant passenger refusing crew instructions." Lauren hesitated. Just a fraction of a second, long enough for Reynolds to notice. "Now," he barked. She swallowed and nodded, fingers moving on the tablet. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She told herself she was just following protocol. She told herself that was enough. Maya leaned back in her seat, as if the decision had already been made. She reached into her coat pocket, not hurried, not furtive, and pulled out her phone. The movement made Lauren flinch. Reynolds noticed. His hand twitched at his side. "Don't," he warned. "Keep your hands visible." Maya unlocked her phone. One message. Short, precise. Code red. Gate Bravo 42. Protocol 7. She sent it, then placed the phone face down on her lap. Reynolds didn't know what that meant. He didn't need to. He was already certain he'd won. Outside, rain streaked down the windows of the terminal, blurring the runway lights into long, wavering lines. The aircraft hummed, engines quiet but alive, waiting. In the silence that followed, something irreversible had begun. The jet bridge groaned as the first heavy boots hit metal. The sound rolled through the cabin before the men appeared, slow and deliberate, each step announcing authority. 2 airport police officers filled the doorway, dark uniforms damp at the cuffs, radios clipped high on their chests, faces already set to neutral. Officer Daniel Ortiz moved first, mid-40s, thick neck, eyes trained forward. His partner, Marcus Hill, younger, broader, scanned hands, then faces, then hands again. Muscle memory. Procedure. Reynolds straightened as if a string had been pulled through his spine. "Gentlemen," he said, voice dropping into practiced command. "Passenger in seat 1A is refusing lawful instructions and presenting a security concern." A murmur rippled throughout first class. Phones were fully out now. No more pretending. The man in row 3 held his steady, elbows braced, lens pointed down the aisle. The elderly woman in row 2 whispered something sharp under her breath, a prayer or a warning, hard to tell. Ortiz stepped forward, stopping just short of Maya's seat. He did not look at her face. He looked at her hands. "Ma'am," he said, calm, rehearsed, "I need you to stand up slowly and gather your belongings." Maya met his gaze. She noted the tiredness around his eyes, the faint hesitation he tried to hide. He had done this before. Too many times. "I will comply," she said clearly, "but I need it stated on record why I'm being removed." Reynolds scoffed. "She's being disruptive." Maya turned her head slightly toward Ortiz, never taking her eyes off him. "I have not raised my voice. I have not touched anyone. I have not threatened anyone. I am being removed because the captain believes I do not belong in a seat I paid for." Ortiz's jaw tightened. Hill shifted behind him. Lauren felt her throat close. This was spiraling faster than she'd expected. "Ma'am," Ortiz said again, firmer. "Please stand." Maya rose, smooth, controlled. She was 5'5". The aisle swallowed her. She turned slowly, placing her coat over her arm. Hill stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his presence without looking. "Hands behind your back," he said. A beat, then the click of metal. The sound cut deep, sharp, final. The cabin reacted as one, a collective intake of breath. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. The elderly man in row 2 stood halfway, his wife gripping his sleeve. "This is wrong," she said. "Loud enough to carry. She hasn't done anything." Hill shot a look down the aisle. "Ma'am, please remain seated." Reynolds watched it all with rigid satisfaction. Control restored, order enforced. This was how problems ended. As Maya was guided forward, she caught Lauren's eye. Lauren looked away first. They marched her down the aisle, past leather seats, past lowered eyes, past lenses that tracked every step. At the threshold, Reynolds leaned in, voice low, meant only for her. "You should have known better," he said. "People like you always push too far." Maya stopped. Hill tightened his grip. "Ma'am, keep moving." She turned her head just enough to look at Reynolds. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, focused, like glass catching light. "Remember this moment," she said. "Remember exactly how sure you feel right now." Reynolds snorted. "Get her off my plane." The cold of the jet bridge hit immediately. Wind rushed through the narrow tunnel, carrying rain and the smell of fuel. Economy passengers stood frozen along the glass walls, watching as Maya passed, cuffs gleaming under fluorescent lights. A teenager raised his phone. A mother pulled her child closer. Whispers followed her like a wake. Inside the terminal, the noise swallowed her. Rolling suitcases, overhead announcements, the dull roar of an airport that never cared who was humiliated in its arteries. At the substation, they sat her on a metal bench, one cuff released, the other secured to a ring bolted into concrete. Officer Hill set her bag down with less care than necessary. Her tablet slid halfway out. The screen lit briefly, lines of data flashing before Hill shoved it back inside without looking. Ortiz began typing at a desk. His fingers moved fast. Efficient, detached. "Full name," he said. "Maya Carter." He paused. Just a fraction. Typed. "Date of birth." She answered. "Reason for removal," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "Ask the captain," Maya said. Ortiz exhaled. "Ma'am, I need you to understand. When a captain calls it in as a threat, our hands are tied." "I understand perfectly," Maya replied. "That's why he chose those words." Ortiz didn't respond. The report continued. Minutes passed. Time stretched thin. Maya stared at the blank wall, counting her breaths, feeling the pulse in her wrist where the cuff had bitten into skin. She thought of the message she had sent, the quiet machinery now in motion. She did not smile. The door burst open. Footsteps. Fast. Uncontrolled. James Whitaker, station manager, late 30s, suit rumpled, face pale. Stumbled in like he'd run the entire terminal. He stopped short when he saw Maya. "Oh no," he whispered. Behind him came Sarah Klein, Regional Operations Director. 51. Hair pulled back, blazer immaculate despite the rain, phone still in her hand. She took one look at the room, then at Maya. The color drained from her face. "Unlock her," Sarah said. Ortiz stood. "Ma'am, this is an active detention. Unlock her. Now." Her voice cut through the room like a blade. Ortiz hesitated, then fumbled for his keys. The cuff released with a dull snap. Maya stood, rolling her wrist once, slow, deliberate. Sarah stepped closer, eyes wide, voice shaking. "Dr. Carter, I am so sorry. We received the alert from North Star. I came as fast as I could." Whitaker swallowed hard. "That flight just pushed back," he said weakly. Maya nodded once. "I know." She extended her hand. "Radio." Sarah handed it over without question. Maya keyed the mic. Her voice changed, sharpened, authority settling into place like gravity. "Tower. This is Atlas Operations, via Regional Command. Emergency stop on Atlas 781. Repeat, Emergency stop. Static. Then confusion. Then compliance. In the cockpit, Reynolds frowned as the engine spooled down hard, the aircraft jolting to a stop. His heart skipped. Atlas. 781, came the tower voice, tight now. Return to gate immediately. Clearance revoked. Reynolds stared at the panel. Negative, he snapped. We are operational. This is not a request. The words landed heavy. Back at the terminal window, Maya watched the plane crawl back toward the gate, lights reflecting off wet concrete like blood in rain. Sarah stood beside her, hands clasped, waiting. What do you want to do? She asked. Maya didn't look away from the aircraft. I want him to walk off that plane, she said, and I want him to understand why. The jet bridge connected with a hollow thud. Inside, Reynolds adjusted his tie. His confidence had cracked just slightly, but ego rushed in to seal it. This was a misunderstanding. A glitch. He would explain. He always did. The cockpit door opened. He stepped out and saw her, standing there, uncuffed, unmoved, watching him like a judge watches the condemned. The air shifted. Reynolds stopped. For the first time since this began, uncertainty crept into his eyes. Reynolds took one step forward, then stopped, as if the floor itself had shifted under him. For a second, no one spoke. The terminal hummed around them, oblivious. Wheels rattled. An announcement droned somewhere overhead about a delayed departure to Phoenix. None of it touched the tight circle that had formed at the mouth of the jet bridge. Maya stood with her hands relaxed at her sides. No cuffs, no coat. Just her, steady and unflinching. Her eyes stayed on Reynolds, measuring, patient, as if she had all the time in the world. Sarah Klein broke the silence first. Captain Reynolds, she said, voice clipped, controlled. You're done flying today. Reynolds blinked. He laughed once, sharp and incredulous. Excuse me? You've been relieved of command, Sarah continued. Effective immediately. Reynolds's gaze snapped from her to Maya, then back again, searching for the angle he was missing. This is ridiculous, he said. I handled a security issue. By the book. Maya tilted her head slightly. Not mocking. Curious. By which book? She asked. Reynolds ignored her. He turned to Sarah. We can discuss this privately. We're discussing it now, Sarah replied. Her hands trembled just enough to betray the pressure she was under. In front of witnesses. Around them, people had stopped pretending not to stare. Gate agents hovered at a distance, eyes wide. Passengers from the front of the plane lingered near the door, phones raised openly now, recording everything. Someone whispered Reynolds' name. Someone else whispered Maya's. Reynolds drew himself up, shoulders back, voice booming. I want a union rep, he said, and I want to know who authorized this circus. Maya stepped forward. Just one step. It was enough to pull every eye to her. You authorized the circus, she said, when you decided your assumptions carried more weight than facts. Reynolds sneered. I don't know who you think you are, but Dr. Maya Carter, she said. Clear, precise, senior auditor for North Star Group. A ripple moved through the crowd, subtle but unmistakable. Reynolds hesitated. The name landed somewhere in his mind, half remembered, half dismissed. That doesn't mean anything here. It means everything, Sarah said quietly. Maya continued, her voice steady, unhurried. North Star finalized the acquisition of Atlas Air this morning. 8 hours ago. The words fell into the space between them like dropped glass. Reynolds's face drained of color. That's not possible, he said. No one told us. You were told, Maya replied. You didn't read the briefing. Silence spread, heavy, suffocating. Reynolds' mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted around, searching for confirmation, denial, anything. He found none. Only faces watching him recalibrate in real time. You own the airline? He asked finally, the word own catching in his throat. Maya didn't answer immediately. She looked past him, down the jet bridge, where passengers were slowly disembarking, pausing to listen, to stare. She thought of the metal bite of the cuff, the way the officer had avoided her eyes, the way Reynolds had smiled. Yes, she said. I do. A low murmur rolled through the terminal. Phones tilted higher. Somewhere, a notification chimed. News traveled fast when it smelled blood. Reynolds took a step back. His confidence, once immovable, fractured visibly. If I had known, Maya raised her hand. No, she said. The word was quiet, but it stopped him cold. Don't finish that sentence. She moved closer now, closing the distance until they stood face to face. He was taller, broader. It didn't matter. If you had known who I was, she continued, you would have treated me like a human being. That's not a defense. That's the problem. Reynolds swallowed. I was doing my job. You were doing harm, Maya said. With authority. She turned slightly, addressing the gathered crowd. I want everyone here to understand something. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a glitch in the system. This was a choice. Sarah stepped forward, holding out a tablet. We pulled the cockpit audio, she said, voice shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up. From pre-boarding. Reynolds's eyes widened. You can't. Maya nodded once. Play it. Sarah tapped the screen. Reynolds' voice filled the terminal, amplified, unmistakable. She doesn't look like a first-class passenger. Make sure she's not in the wrong seat before the real one shows up. A collective gasp. Someone muttered, Jesus. The audio continued. For all I know, she's a risk. People like that slip through all the time. Maya watched Reynolds as his own words dismantled him. He looked smaller now, older. The stripes on his shoulders, suddenly ornamental, meaningless. Turn it off, he snapped. This is out of context. There is no context where that's acceptable, Maya said. She turned to the officers who had brought her in. Ortiz and Hill stood frozen near the wall, faces tight. You were told I was a threat, she said. Did I act like one? Ortiz shook his head slowly. No, ma'am. Did I resist? No. Did I raise my voice? He hesitated. Number. Maya nodded. Thank you. She faced Reynolds again. You escalated because you needed to be right. Because the idea that you might be wrong was intolerable. Reynolds's voice broke. I've flown 30 years. And today, Maya said, you landed, she turned to Sarah. Terminate his employment. For cause. Reynolds stared at her. You can't do this here. I can, Maya replied. And I am. Sarah swallowed and nodded. Captain Reynolds, please surrender your ID and insignia. Reynolds's hands shook as he unclipped his badge. It hit the floor with a hollow clatter. One by one, he tore the epaulets from his shoulders. The gold stripes fell beside the badge, dull against the tile. No one applauded. Not yet. Escort him out, Maya said, and notify FAA compliance. Reynolds was guided away, his protests fading into stunned silence. As he passed the crowd, eyes followed him, no longer admiring, recording, judging. Maya exhaled slowly. She turned back toward the gate, where passengers waited, confused, restless, watching history form in real time. My name is Maya Carter, she said, raising her voice just enough to carry. I apologize for what you witnessed. This airline will do better. A beat. Then applause. Not explosive, earned. It grew as she stood there, unbowed, the weight of the moment settling around her. Somewhere behind her, the engines of Atlas 781 powered down completely. The flight would not be leaving as planned. Neither would the world Reynolds thought he controlled. The applause faded, but the silence that followed was heavier. Maya stood still as the sound dissolved into the terminal's usual noise, as if the building itself were reluctant to absorb what had just happened. Phones lowered slowly. People exhaled. A few passengers wiped their eyes without realizing they had been holding tears. Others stared at the empty jet bridge where Reynolds had disappeared, trying to reconcile the man they had once trusted with the one they had just seen dismantled. Sarah Klein moved closer, lowering her voice. FAA compliance is on the line, she said. So is legal and corporate communications. They want to know what to say. Maya nodded. Tell them the truth, she said. No spin, no delay. Sarah hesitated. The board worky for the truth now, Maya replied. Nearby, Lauren Mitchell stood frozen by the galley entrance, her tablet hanging limp in her hands. Her face was pale, eyes glassy, jaw clenched, as if holding back something sharp and painful. She had replayed the moment over and over in her head, the instant she had looked away, instead of speaking up. It felt like watching herself fail in slow motion. Maya noticed her. Lauren, she said calmly. Lauren flinched, then straightened, forcing herself to meet Maya's eyes. Yes, Dr. Carter. Were you following orders? Maya asked, or were you following assumptions? Lauren's throat worked. She glanced toward the floor, then back up. Both, she admitted. And that's the part I can't justify. Maya studied her for a long moment. Not unkindly, not forgiving either. We'll talk later, she said. In detail. Lauren nodded. Relief and dread mixed in her chest. Being seen was terrifying. Being ignored would have been worse. At the gate podium, James Whittaker was already fielding questions from passengers, his voice tight, rehearsed. "We're arranging accommodations," he said again and again. "Hotel vouchers, meal credits, alternative flights." A man in his 60s stepped forward, his expression sharp but controlled. "That's not enough," he said. "What happened to her could have happened to any of us." A younger woman beside him nodded. "It already has," she said quietly. Maya turned toward them. "You're right," she said. "And that's why this doesn't end here." She gestured toward Sarah. "Ground the aircraft for inspection. Full crew review. Everyone off duty until cleared." Sarah's eyes widened. "That will cancel, I know," Maya said. "Cancel it." The decision rippled outward immediately. Phones buzzed again. Messages flew. Somewhere, a news alert broke. Atlas Air grounded at JFK after discrimination incident. Inside the aircraft, First Officer Daniel Brooks sat alone in the cockpit, hands resting on his knees, staring at the darkened displays. He had watched Reynolds unravel from the co-pilot's seat, felt the shame rise like heat in his chest. He had told himself for years that staying quiet was survival. Now it felt like complicity. When Maya boarded the plane again, the cabin stilled. She walked the aisle slowly, deliberately, the camera in her mind capturing every detail. The leather seats, the scattered pillows, the faint scent of spilled champagne. Evidence of comfort that had become a shield for cruelty. Daniel stood as she approached the cockpit door. "Dr. Carter," he said, voice steady but strained. "For what it's worth," I tried to tell him. "I know," Maya said. He blinked. "You do?" "I was listening," she replied. Daniel nodded once, a weight lifting he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Then I'll say it clearly now. He was wrong." Maya held his gaze. "That matters." Back in the terminal, security had begun to cordon off the gate. Reporters clustered just beyond the barriers, microphones raised, eyes bright with anticipation. They shouted questions as Maya emerged. "Dr. Carter, is this about race? Is Atlas Air facing lawsuits? Did you plan this confrontation?" Maya stopped. The noise fell unevenly, like rain interrupted by wind. "I didn't plan to be humiliated," she said. "I didn't plan to be handcuffed. But I did plan to see how power behaves when it thinks no one important is watching." She let that sit. "What happened today," she continued, "was not an exception. It was a pattern made visible." A reporter pushed forward. "What happens next?" Maya's eyes hardened. "Accountability." The word traveled fast. By the time Maya reached the operations office, her phone was vibrating non-stop. Messages from board members, from advocacy groups, from employees who had been waiting years for someone to say the quiet part out loud. She ignored most of them. Instead, she opened an email draft and began typing. To all Atlas Air employees. Her fingers moved steadily. "Today, we witnessed a failure of judgment and a failure of culture. This is not about one man. This is about systems that reward arrogance and punish dignity. Effective immediately, we are suspending all flight operations pending a full cultural and procedural audit. Every role, every level, No exceptions. She paused, then added one more line. If you have been silent because you were afraid, that era is over. She hit send. In a holding area near baggage claim, Reynolds sat alone, jacket folded beside him, hands clasped tightly together. His phone buzzed once, then again. He didn't answer. The world he had relied on to cushion his fall had turned its back with terrifying speed. He stared at the floor, replaying Maya's words. Remember this moment. For the first time in decades, there was no cockpit to retreat to, no authority to invoke, just the echo of his own voice, preserved, undeniable. At the gate, passengers began to disperse, some lingering to speak with Maya, others leaving quietly, shaken. An elderly woman approached, eyes kind but firm. I've been flying longer than he has, she said. Thank you for not letting him win. Maya nodded. Thank you for standing up when it mattered. As the terminal lights dimmed slightly with the approaching evening, Maya finally allowed herself a breath. Not relief, resolve. She looked back once more at the aircraft, now silent, grounded, stripped of its illusion of untouchability. This was only the beginning, and the reckoning, long delayed, had finally found its gate. Night settled over the airport like a held breath. The terminal lights shifted from harsh white to a softer amber, but nothing about the mood felt calm. Operations rooms buzzed. Phones rang without pause. Screens flickered with updates, red banners stacking one on top of another. Atlas Air Ground stopped. FAA review. Initiated. Viral video reaches millions. Maya sat alone in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the tarmac. Her coat lay folded on the table beside a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Outside, ground crews moved slowly around idle aircraft, their reflective vests catching the light like scattered sparks. Power had paused. That was intentional. Sarah Klein stood at the door, hesitating before knocking lightly. Legal is ready, she said. So is compliance. And HR. Maya didn't turn. Bring them in. They filed in quietly. Men and women in tailored suits, faces tight, eyes alert. Some carried binders. Others clutched tablets like shields. This was the part they understood. Meetings. Language. Control. Maya stood. What happened today was predictable, she began, which means it was preventable. No one spoke. You can call it a personnel issue, if that helps you sleep, she continued. But this is a structural failure, and structures don't collapse because of one crack. They collapse because no one wants to admit the weight is wrong. A man from legal cleared his throat. We recommend a statement expressing regret while the investigation. No, Maya said. Flat, immediate. The word cut clean. We are not expressing regret, she said. We are acknowledging harm. Regret centers us. Accountability centers the people affected. Silence again. He nodded slowly, scribbling notes he wasn't sure how to use yet. Across the room, a woman from HR shifted in her seat. "What about the crew?" she asked. "Collective bargaining agreements. Do not confuse protection with immunity," Maya replied. "Everyone will be reviewed. Fairly, thoroughly, including you, including me." That landed. She tapped the table once, drawing focus. Here's what happens next. Mandatory bias and authority training for all flight and ground staff. Independent oversight. Anonymous reporting channels with teeth. And immediate changes to escalation protocols. No more vague language like threat or non-compliant without evidence. The compliance officer nodded, already anticipating the paperwork avalanche. "FAA will want. They'll get it," Maya said. "Full access, full cooperation." The meeting ended without ceremony. There was no applause here, only work. Later, alone again, Maya finally took a sip of the coffee. It was cold. She didn't care. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Saw the footage. "Proud of you. Call me when you can." She knew the number. She didn't respond yet. In another part of the airport, Reynolds sat in the back of a ride share, watching the familiar lights blur past the window. The driver said nothing. The radio murmured low. Reynolds' phone vibrated in his hand like a live thing. Messages stacked up. Union reps. Old colleagues. Then fewer. Then none. He opened the news. There he was, a freeze frame from the video. His face caught mid-sneer, eyes sharp, mouth twisted. The caption was brutal in its simplicity. Atlas Air. Captain removed after handcuffing. Airline owner. His stomach turned. He scrolled. Comment after comment. Words he had used for others now aimed at him. Arrogant, racist, abusive, finished. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Just a flicker. Recognition. Judgment. Then his eyes went back to the road. Reynolds pulled his collar tighter. Suddenly cold. Back at the terminal, Lauren Mitchell sat alone in the crew lounge, staring at her hands. She had washed them twice already. They still felt unclean. She replayed the moment again. The hesitation. The choice. She had told herself she was staying professional, that it wasn't her place. Her phone buzzed. An email from HR, mandatory meeting scheduled. Effective immediately. She closed her eyes. Across the city, the video crossed another threshold. 10 million views. Then 15. Commentators dissected body language. Experts debated authority. Ordinary people shared stories they had buried for years. This isn't rare. This happened to me. Finally, someone didn't let it slide. The story grew beyond the airport, beyond Atlas Air. It touched something raw and familiar. Maya watched it unfold from her hotel room. Shoes kicked off, jacket draped over a chair. She sat on the edge of the bed, tablet balanced on her knees, scrolling through internal reports. Names, complaints, patterns. There it was. She wasn't surprised. A knock at the door. She opened it to find Daniel Brooks standing there, posture stiff, eyes tired. He held his cap in both hands. "Dr. Carter," he said. I wanted to say, "Thank you," for saying what the rest of us were afraid to. Maya stepped aside. "Come in." He didn't sit. "I've flown with Reynolds for 5 years. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility to correct him, that it was safer to stay quiet." Maya studied him. "And now?" He swallowed. "Now I know quiet has a cost." She nodded. "It does." He hesitated. "If you're looking for people to help change things, I want to be one of them." Maya considered him, then nodded once. "We'll talk." After he left, she stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere below, planes lifted and landed, their paths precise, their systems unforgiving. Power was like that too, she thought. It either followed rules or it failed catastrophically. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she answered. "Mom," she said softly. On the other end, a pause. Then, "I saw it," her mother said. "Are you okay?" Maya closed her eyes. "I will be." Another pause. "Your father would have been proud." Maya let the words settle. She didn't cry. Not yet. When the call ended, she returned to her tablet and opened a new document. Title: Cultural Overhaul. Phase 1. She typed until her eyes burned. Outside, the airport slept uneasily. Grounded planes waited. Systems recalibrated. A reckoning moved forward, slow but unstoppable. And somewhere between outrage and hope, something long overdue had finally begun to shift. Morning came without apology. The sun rose over the runway, pale and indifferent, lighting up rows of grounded aircraft, like a row of witnesses who had seen too much to look away. Inside Atlas Air headquarters, the overnight silence was gone, replaced by a low, constant hum. Screens glowed. Coffee machines hissed. People spoke in clipped tones, every sentence edged with urgency. Maya walked through the lobby just after 7 in the morning, her footsteps measured, her expression unreadable. Heads turned as she passed. Some employees straightened instinctively. Others looked down, unsure whether they were allowed to meet her eyes. She felt the weight of it, the way authority reshapes space without asking permission. In the executive conference room, the board was already seated. 12 people. Men and women who had survived mergers, scandals, recessions. Faces polished by years of control. Today, that Polish cracked. The chairman cleared his throat. "Dr. Carter, before we begin." "We already began," Maya said, taking her seat at the head of the table. "Yesterday." No one argued. She tapped the screen in front of her. Footage filled the wall, not the viral clip. Internal footage, gate audio, crew communications, timestamps, names. "This is not a single incident," she said. "It's a culture that learned how to protect itself." A board member shifted. "We've invested heavily in training and ignored the data," Maya replied, "because it was inconvenient." She swiped again. Complaints appeared. Settlements, quiet transfers, performance reviews that praised confidence while ignoring cruelty. "Confidence without accountability is how this happens," she said. "You rewarded men who mistook intimidation for leadership." The room held its breath. I will not run an airline that confuses authority with infallibility, Maya continued. If that makes some of you uncomfortable, good. Silence followed. Then the chairman nodded slowly. What do you need from us? Maya didn't hesitate. Support. Or your resignations. The message was clear. Across the city, Reynolds sat at a small kitchen table in an apartment that suddenly felt temporary. The mug in his hand had gone cold. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard his own voice played back to him, stripped of context, stripped of excuses. He opened his laptop, drafted an email, deleted it, drafted another. I never intended delete. I was acting in the interest delete. He slammed the laptop shut. His phone buzzed. A message from the union. We're reviewing your case. Do not make public statements. He stared at the words. Reviewing. The same word he'd used for Maya's seat. For her presence. For her humanity. He laughed once. It sounded wrong in the empty room. Back at headquarters, HR teams moved like surgeons, precise and relentless. Interviews, statements, timelines. Lauren Mitchell sat in a small office, hands folded tightly in her lap as a compliance officer spoke. Did you believe Dr. Carter posed a threat? The officer asked. Lauren hesitated. The truth pressed against her teeth. No, she said. I believed the captain wanted her gone. The officer nodded, writing. And you complied? Yes. Why? Lauren swallowed. Because saying no felt like ending my career. The officer looked up. And how does that feel now? Lauren closed her eyes, like it ended anyway. At the FAA regional office, investigators listened to recordings, faces grim. They had heard variations of this story before. Too many times. This isn't just a violation, one said. It's a pattern. Across social media, the narrative hardened. Think pieces turned into demands. Employees from other airlines began sharing stories. Names were named. Screenshots surfaced. Silence cracked. Maya watched it from her office, the blinds half drawn. She didn't flinch at the criticism that came with the praise. Savior, tyrant, disruptor. All labels. None of them mattered as much as the work. Daniel Brooks knocked lightly and entered when she waved him in. He looked different today. Straighter, lighter somehow. They reassigned me, he said. Training division, temporary. Maya raised an eyebrow. How do you feel about that? He smiled faintly. Like it's the right place to be. She nodded. Good. You start tomorrow. He blinked. Tomorrow? She smiled slightly. Culture doesn't wait. Later that afternoon, Maya stood alone in the hangar, the smell of oil and metal thick in the air. Mechanics paused as she walked past, nodding respectfully. She ran her hand along the fuselage of a grounded plane, feeling the cold solidity beneath her palm. Machines obey rules, she thought. People choose whether to. Her phone buzzed, a notification from legal. Lawsuit filed. Reynolds. Wrongful termination. She closed the notification without opening it. Across town, Reynolds sat in a waiting room with beige walls and outdated magazines, his knee bouncing uncontrollably. His attorney leaned in close. "We'll argue procedure," the man said. "You had authority." Reynolds stared at the floor. "Authority doesn't mean what I thought it did." The attorney paused. "Be careful with statements like that." Reynolds didn't respond. Back at Atlas Air, Maya drafted another email. To all passengers affected by Flight 781. She apologized, fully, without qualifiers. She outlined steps, refunds, vouchers, policy changes. At the end, she added a line she hadn't planned. "You deserved better." She hit send. That evening, as the city darkened again, Maya finally allowed herself to sit still. The day had taken something from her. Energy, innocence, illusion. But it had given something back, too. Clarity. She stood by the window, watching a single plane lift into the sky from a neighboring runway, its lights blinking steadily as it climbed. This was bigger than her. Bigger than Reynolds. Bigger than Atlas Air. It was about who gets believed, who gets protected, who gets erased, and for the first time in a long time, the answer had changed, not completely, not easily, but enough to matter, enough to begin. The lawsuit arrived 3 days later, printed on thick paper, delivered by a courier who didn't ask for a signature. Maya read it standing by her desk, sunlight slanting through the windows, dust floating in the air like static. Wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. The language was aggressive, almost theatrical, as if volume could replace substance. She handed it to legal without comment. Across the city, Reynolds sat in his attorney's office, hands clasped, jaw tight. He had rehearsed this version of himself carefully. The wronged professional, the scapegoat, the veteran betrayed by a system that had suddenly turned on him. "They're painting you as a monster," his attorney said. "We counter with intent. You acted in good faith." Reynolds nodded, but the words rang hollow even to him. Good faith. He remembered the sneer in his voice, the satisfaction, the way power had felt solid in his hands. At Atlas Air, the internal investigation accelerated. Names surfaced, patterns sharpened. Complaints, once dismissed as isolated, began to line up with unnerving precision. Entire departments were implicated not by action, but by silence. Maya chaired the review panels herself. One by one, employees sat across from her. Some defensive, some terrified, some relieved to finally speak. A baggage supervisor admitted he'd been warned not to file reports. A junior attendant described being told to read the room when deciding who to challenge. A dispatcher confessed she'd learned which captains could be questioned and which ones could not. Maya listened. She took notes. She asked the same question every time. "Who taught you that?" The answers varied. No one said her name. In a quiet corner office, Lauren Mitchell sat through her final review. Her uniform hung untouched in her locker. She wore civilian clothes now, uncomfortable without the armor of routine. "I should have said something," Lauren said. voice barely steady. I knew it was wrong. Yes, Maya replied. You did? Lauren swallowed. Will I be fired? Maya considered her. You will be suspended without pay, required to complete retraining, and reassigned. Lauren nodded. Tears pooled, but she didn't let them fall. Thank you, she said, though she wasn't sure why. It's not a favor, Maya said. It's a chance. Use it. Outside, the story refused to fade. News segments replayed the footage with forensic intensity. Pundits argued. Former employees came forward. Advocacy groups demanded audits across the industry. Lawmakers tweeted statements that sounded suspiciously like they were written by interns. Maya declined most interviews. When she did speak, she spoke plainly. This isn't about cancelling people, she said in one appearance. It's about cancelling harm. Reynolds watched it all from his living room, blinds drawn, phone face down on the table. He tried not to read the comments. He failed. His wife sat across from him, arms crossed, eyes tired in a way he hadn't noticed before. I didn't know it was this bad, she said. He opened his mouth, closed it again. You never listened, she continued. Not to me. Not to anyone. He stared at the carpet. I was good at my job. You were powerful, she said. That's not the same thing. The silence that followed felt final. At Atlas Air, Maya stood before the first full company-wide assembly since the incident. Thousands of employees tuned in remotely. The auditorium was full but quiet. She didn't raise her voice. You don't owe me loyalty, she said. You owe each other dignity. She outlined new policies, new reporting lines, new metrics for leadership that included emotional intelligence and ethical decision-making. And this, she said, pausing, this is not optional. The chat window exploded, applause icons, messages of support, a few angry reactions. She expected that. Later that evening, Daniel Brooks stopped by her office again. This time, he smiled. Training sessions are full, he said. People are signing up voluntarily. Maya nodded. Fear kept them quiet. Permission lets them speak. He hesitated. What about Reynolds? Maya looked out the window. The law will decide his case. Life will decide the rest. Days turned into weeks. The lawsuit unraveled under scrutiny. Evidence mounted. Depositions exposed inconsistencies. Reynolds's attorney grew cautious. Settlement offers floated, then sank. One afternoon, Maya received a message marked urgent. FAA, license revocation hearing scheduled. She read it once. Then again. At the hearing, Reynolds sat alone at the long table, suit slightly wrinkled, shoulders hunched. The panel listened as evidence was presented. Audio, video, testimony. When it was his turn to speak, he stood slowly. I believed my authority made me right, he said. I was wrong. The room was still. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. But I accept the consequences. It wasn't enough to save him. The ruling came swiftly, license permanently revoked, effective immediately. Reynolds nodded. He had known. Outside, cameras waited. He walked past them without stopping. Maya watched the announcement from her office. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She closed her eyes and breathed. The airline stabilized. Stock rebounded. Trust returned, cautiously. New leaders emerged. Old ones adapted or left. 1 year later, Maya stood at the dedication of a new training center, bearing a simple plaque. The Carter Standard. Daniel Brooks, now promoted, stood in the front row, clapping. Lauren Mitchell watched from the back, eyes bright, uniform crisp, posture different now. Humble, aware. Far from the ceremony, in a long-term parking lot on the edge of the airport, a shuttle bus pulled up with a tired hiss. The driver stepped out briefly, stretching his back. It was Reynolds. He kept his head down as passengers boarded. One glanced at him, frowned, then looked away. "Terminal 4?" a woman asked. Reynolds nodded. "Next stop." As the bus rolled forward, a jet roared overhead, lifting cleanly into the sky, lights blinking against the blue. Reynolds watched it disappear. Once, he had owned the sky. Now, he drove beneath it. And somewhere between the two, the world had moved on without him. The first snowfall came early that year, thin and quiet, softening the edges of the city without asking permission. Maya watched it from her office window as dawn broke, flakes drifting past the glass like unanswered questions. Below, Atlas Air employees crossed the plaza in coats and scarves, shoulders hunched, breath visible. The company had survived the shock. Now it was learning how to live with the truth of it. Her calendar was full, but she let the moment linger. Change, she had learned, was loud at first. Then it became work. A knock at the door pulled her back. Sarah Klein stepped in, tablet tucked under her arm. She looked different now. Less tense, still sharp. "The first quarterly report is in," Sarah said. "Customer trust index is up. Employee retention, too." Maya nodded. "And complaints?" "More," Sarah admitted. "But they're being filed. That's the difference." Maya allowed herself a small breath. "Good." Sarah hesitated. "There's something else." She handed over the tablet. An internal proposal. Title bold at the top. The Carter Fellowship Program. Maya scanned it slowly. Scholarships. Flight training. Maintenance engineering. Priority for candidates from underrepresented communities. Mentorship baked into every level. "This wasn't my idea," Sarah said quickly. "It came from the pilots." Maya looked up. "Which ones?" "All of them," Sarah replied. The weight of that landed differently. Heavier. Better. "Approve it," Maya said. By mid-morning, the announcement went out. The response was immediate. Messages flooded in. Gratitude. Skepticism. Hope. The messy mix of people daring to believe something might actually change. Across town, Reynolds sat in the driver's seat of the shuttle bus, engine idling, heater rattling like it might give up at any moment. Snow clung to the windshield. He scraped it away with slow, practiced strokes. A radio host's voice cut through the static. Former Atlas Air Captain Thomas Reynolds, whose license was revoked last year following a discrimination scandal. Reynolds turned the volume down. At the next stop, a group of travelers boarded, dragging bags, stamping snow from their boots. None of them looked at him. That, somehow, was worse. As the bus pulled away, a young man in the back spoke up. "Hey," he said. "Thanks for stopping. It's cold out here." Reynolds nodded once, eyes fixed on the road. Back at headquarters, Maya sat in on a training session. Not observing, participating. She listened as employees role-played scenarios, heard the hesitation in their voices, the fear of getting it wrong. That fear, she said when it was her turn to speak, is a sign you care. Don't get rid of it. Learn to work through it. Daniel Brooks caught her eye from across the room and smiled. Later that afternoon, a package arrived at her office. No return address. Inside, a single item. Reynolds's captain wings. 4 gold stripes, dulled, wrapped carefully in tissue. Maya stared at them for a long moment. Then she placed them in a drawer and closed it. Some symbols didn't need to be displayed. That evening, she attended a town hall streamed live to employees and the public. Questions poured in. How do you make sure this doesn't fade? What happens when you're gone? Maya answered without rehearsed lines. You build systems that don't depend on one person, and you hold them accountable even when it's uncomfortable. A pause. Then, especially then, the applause was quieter now, more thoughtful. Winter deepened. Flights resumed fully. The headlines moved on to the next outrage, the next scandal. But inside Atlas Air, something had shifted. Meetings felt different. Voices carried further. Silence no longer meant safety. Lauren Mitchell stood at the front of a training room one afternoon, explaining de-escalation protocols. Her tone was measured, her posture grounded. When I failed, she said, it wasn't because I didn't know better. It was because I didn't believe I had permission to act. You do. The room listened. In the parking lot, weeks later, Reynolds parked the shuttle and sat for a moment before turning off the engine. Snow dusted the hood. A jet thundered overhead, low and powerful. He remembered the feeling, the way the controls responded, the illusion of command. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Saw the fellowship announcement. About time. He stared at it, then typed a reply. Deleted it, typed again. Good luck to them. He sent it, then set the phone down. At a ceremony in early spring, Maya stood before a small group of young candidates, their faces bright with nerves and possibility. She spoke briefly. No speech, just a few words. You don't have to prove you belong, she said. You already do. The work is proving you can make it better. They nodded. Some cried. One laughed, overwhelmed. As they dispersed, Maya caught sight of her reflection in the hangar glass. She looked tired, older, stronger. Change had cost her something. She accepted that. That night, alone in her apartment, she finally opened the drawer and took out the wings. She turned them over in her hands, feeling their weight. Authority, she thought, was always heavier than it looked. She placed them back and closed the drawer for good. Outside, a plane lifted into the darkening sky, steady and sure, its path invisible but true. Maya watched until it vanished, then turned away, already thinking about what still needed to be done. Spring arrived unevenly, the kind that teased warmth and then pulled it back without warning. Maya noticed it in the way people lingered outside headquarters a little longer, in the cautious optimism that had replaced the brittle tension of winter. Atlas Air no longer felt like a company in recovery. It felt like a company in rehearsal, practicing what it meant to be different without yet trusting the performance. She walked the hangar floor that morning without an escort. Mechanics glanced up, nodded, went back to work. No stiffening. No silence. That alone told her more than any report ever could. At the far end of the hangar, a small group had gathered. Young, nervous, jackets a little too new, the first cohort of the Carter Fellowship. Maya stopped at a distance and watched them talk among themselves. One laughed too loudly. Another stared at the aircraft like it might disappear if she blinked. A young man ran his hand along the fuselage, reverent, almost afraid. Daniel Brooks stood with them, hands in his pockets, answering questions patiently. He looked comfortable now, grounded in a way that had nothing to do with altitude. When Maya approached, the group went quiet. She hated that part. "You don't have to stand like that," she said gently. "I'm not inspecting you." A few smiles broke through. Someone exhaled. They walked together down the line of aircraft. Maya listened more than she spoke. She heard fragments of stories. Parents who never flew. First-generation college graduates. People who had been told, in ways both subtle and blunt, that the sky was not meant for them. "It still feels unreal," one woman admitted. "Like someone's going to tell us there's been a mistake." Maya nodded. That feeling doesn't go away. You just learn not to let it stop you. Later, in her office, Maya reviewed the final report from the Independent Oversight Committee. It was thorough, unflinching. It named failures without soft language. It praised changes without pretending they were complete. At the end, one line stood out. Sustained reform will depend on leadership modeling vulnerability as consistently as it enforces policy. Maya closed the file. That afternoon, she received a request she had been expecting. Reynolds wanted to meet. Legal advised against it. PR suggested silence. Maya considered both and ignored them. She agreed on one condition: no lawyers, no press. They met in a small conference room at a neutral location. No logos, no windows. Reynolds arrived early. He looked older, not just aged, but reduced, as if the space he once took up had collapsed inward. He stood when she entered. She didn't offer her hand. He didn't try to take it. "Thank you for agreeing," he said. Maya sat. "You asked." He nodded. "I won't take much of your time." She said nothing. "I've replayed that day more times than I can count," he continued. "Not to justify it, to understand how it felt so inevitable." Maya watched him carefully. His hands were steady. His voice was not. "I thought authority meant certainty," he said. "That doubt was weakness, and when you didn't doubt yourself, it felt like a challenge." Maya leaned back slightly. It wasn't a challenge. It was a boundary. He nodded, eyes dropping. I see that now. Silence stretched between them. Not hostile, just honest. I'm not asking for anything, Reynolds said. No job, no redemption arc. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Not because of what it cost me, because of what it did to you. Maya considered him. The words mattered. Timing mattered too. I accept your apology, she said. That doesn't change the outcome. I know, he replied. It shouldn't. When he stood to leave, he hesitated. For what it's worth, the airline is better without me. Maya met his eyes. It's better without what you represented. What you do next is up to you. He left without another word. Maya stayed seated for a long moment after the door closed. The meeting hadn't softened anything. It hadn't needed to. Closure, she had learned, wasn't relief. It was clarity. Across town, Reynolds walked out into the afternoon light, shoulders slightly straighter than before. The city moved around him, indifferent. That was fine. He was learning how to exist without an audience. At Atlas Air, preparations were underway for the annual shareholders' meeting. This time, the agenda was public. So was the tone. Maya stood at the podium as cameras rolled. She spoke about performance, about safety, about profitability. Then she shifted. We learned something painful this year, she said. Not about one person, but about what happens when power goes unexamined. She paused. Let the silence work. We will not be remembered for the crisis, she continued. We will be remembered for how we responded to it. Every policy we change, every leader we promote, every voice we choose to listen to will either prove we meant it or that we didn't. The vote passed overwhelmingly. Later that evening, Maya returned home exhausted in a way that felt earned. She kicked off her shoes and sat on the floor, back against the couch, lights off. The city glowed beyond the windows. Her phone buzzed. A message from one of the fellows. First solo simulator session today. I didn't freeze. Maya smiled. Another message followed, from an unknown number. Thank you for not letting it be buried. She set the phone down and closed her eyes. The story had moved beyond her now. That was the point. Outside, a plane cut across the dusk, contrail fading slowly behind it. Not permanent, not meant to be. Maya breathed in, then out, and allowed herself one quiet thought before sleep claimed her. The sky hadn't changed. Who was allowed to reach it had. The anniversary arrived without ceremony. No banners, no speeches, just a quiet morning at the airport where everything had begun. Maya stood near the glass wall overlooking the runway, hands in her coat pockets, watching a departure push back with calm precision. The engines hummed. The crew moved with practiced coordination. Nothing dramatic. That was the point. Atlas Air was no longer news. It was working. Behind her, footsteps approached. Daniel Brooks stopped a respectful distance away. He wore 4 stripes now. Fresh, earned. Boarding is on schedule, he said. Full flight. Maya nodded. Good. He hesitated, then smiled. You know, People still talk about that day, but not the way they used to. How do they talk about it now? She asked. As the moment things stopped being ignored, she absorbed that. Not pride, not triumph, just confirmation. Across the terminal, the Carter Fellowship group gathered near their gate. Some were headed to simulators, others to classrooms. One young woman caught Maya's eye and lifted her chin slightly, a quiet acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. Maya returned the nod. She didn't belong to the spotlight anymore. She had never wanted it. What she wanted was momentum that didn't depend on her presence. Systems that corrected themselves. People who intervened before harm hardened into habit. That was harder to measure than stock price or headlines. But she saw it everywhere now, in the way gate agents questioned decisions without fear, in the way flight attendants backed each other up, in the way silence no longer masqueraded as professionalism. Later that day, Maya sat alone in her office, packing a box, not leaving, just clearing space. Old reports, framed articles, artifacts of a moment that no longer needed to dominate the room. At the bottom of a drawer, she found the gold stripes again. She didn't pick them up this time. She closed the drawer gently. Across town, Reynolds finished his shift and stepped off the shuttle bus as the last passengers dispersed. He stood for a moment, listening to the distant roar of engines, the sound still familiar, still sharp. He didn't resent it anymore. He understood now that proximity was not entitlement. He pulled his jacket tighter and walked toward the parking lot. Just another man moving through the edges of a system that no longer bent around him. At Atlas Air headquarters, the board meeting adjourned early, not because there was nothing to discuss, but because the work was finally routine. Policies reviewed, metrics tracked, culture treated as infrastructure, not decoration. Maya watched the sun dip behind the skyline from the conference room window. She felt the weight of the year settle into something solid and survivable. Change had not been clean. It had not been gentle. But it had been real. She thought about the first moment on the plane, the command to stand, the choice not to, the thin line between compliance and self-erasure. She had crossed that line once. She would not cross it again. As evening settled, she recorded a final internal message for employees. Not polished, not rehearsed. This company will keep making mistakes, she said. What matters is whether we recognize them before they become patterns, whether we protect dignity as fiercely as we protect profit. That is the standard now. She ended the recording and shut off the camera. Outside, another plane lifted into the dark, steady and sure, its path guided by systems designed to correct even the smallest deviation. Human systems were harder, but they could learn. The story did not belong to her anymore. It belonged to everyone who chose to speak when silence was safer, to stand when standing cost something, to remember that authority was borrowed, not owned. If this story moved you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments with these 3 words: dignity over power.